Hello and welcome to All the Things.
Hello, welcome to another episode of All the Things. I am Monique Duson, and I'm back.
This is the show where we discuss all the things related to God, the Bible, and real life. My mic's on, right, Bob?
But I'm back.
You are back.
Yes.
So we are live. Make sure to interact with us because this is going to be a fun show. We have a lot planned. I think we have successfully stressed out Bob with how many visual elements we got in the queue.
That's okay. He's good.
Shout out to our moderators, Elaine and Sylvia. Thanks for helping us in the chat. We would love to talk to you. And the best way to interact with us is on YouTube. So if you're watching on Facebook, that's okay. If you want us to make sure to see your comment, hop over to YouTube. Often I have to just go to Facebook after the show is over. And then I think, oh, this would have been a great question. Facebook just doesn't make it easy to access the comments live sometimes. And so if you really want to jump on with us, YouTube's always the best way. So you know what happened while you were gone, Monique?
I feel like a lot happened while I was gone.
So what
I do. I don't even know where to start. Like I only saw American news every once in a while. I know there was a debate, or you can call it a debacle.
It wasn't really a debate. Our friend Kathy Gibbons had a whole post about why it wasn't an actual debate. But yeah, so that happened. Haitians have been in the news. So your cousins.
Yeah, I've watched some of that and I've listened to some of that today, and I really I think how it's being framed is very unfortunate.
Yeah.
To talk about an entire people group as if everyone in that people group is participating in something. I think it's about eating pets, right? That's
the kind of the big story, but I think it's part of the larger story of just border issues and vetting people, and it's one piece of a very large and confusing conversation.
Yeah, and as Christians, because I've seen a lot of Christians sharing this and like making fun and things like that, and I'm like, wow, like if I were to talk about your people group like that, you would be in your feelings. So it's kind of like we should remember that people are still image bearers, people are still made in God's image, and if something is done by one person, that doesn't necessarily reflect the entire group. And I can have a conversation about border control. Yeah. Like I can do both of those things at the same time without having to demean an entire group of people. I am saying that it looks very demeaning from what I've seen. Maybe you haven't seen those things. I don't know, but
it's definitely a rough conversation. That's for sure. There's just a lot that's happened at the ministry. A lot happened. While you were gone, we launched the new website. People can go check it out at centerforbiblicalunity.com. And do want to let everyone know our fall book groups have launched this week, or actually last week. But coming up in October, you and I are running a book group on our forthcoming book, Walking in Unity. And registration for that is now open. So if you want to go check out the website, the new website, go do that, centerforbiblicalunity.com. Go to the book clubs page and check out how you can register for our book club coming in October. And it is going to be awesome. We'll be premiering our videos. We're coming out with short videos to help people have discussions about the book in their small groups and in their churches. We're going to be releasing more information about that in the coming week, but we'll be watching those videos as part of the book study. And we did fundraising for that a couple years ago. So we want to let everybody know that those book discussion videos are finally coming. The curriculum is finally coming for Walking in Unity. So this just feels like there's a lot happening at the ministry right now.
Yeah, there's a ton happening. I think it's all very good and exciting. Um, and I can't wait, to be able to share it with all of our friends and family who are, friends and family at CFBU. So one, I wanted to say thank you to all of our donors and supporters who helped to make this happen. Every year, there are people who give to the Center for Biblical Unity so that we can continue to do ministry, so that we can travel, that we can, you know, produce content and create curriculum and write and things like that. And so none of that would be possible without our family of donors and supporters. And so
For
super
sure.
grateful. Thank you very much.
So you're at your house tonight because we're doing the show live, but you're at your house because you're still a little bit recovering from the trip. You got home late Thursday night.
I got home at midnight. It was exactly midnight
Oh,
Friday
okay.
morning.
All right.
Yeah. And I
So
mean, I landed around 9 or so. And then the traffic at LAX, yeah, it was very, very chaotic. Shout out to Kat, my friend Kat, for picking me up from LAX. And yeah, by the time we got food and got back here, it was midnight.
wow.
Um,
So
yeah,
you
and
tell
so
us,
it's been a long 2 days. Yeah.
yeah. So tell us about where you've been, how long you've been gone, and then we're going to be sharing about your trip tonight on the show. In the second half, we're going to be talking about the Mount Walsh, whatever that was. I don't know whether not exactly a documentary, but the film "Am I a Racist?" We went and saw it this morning, so we'll talk about that in the second half of the show. But first, tell us about where you've been and how long you've been gone and all of that.
Yeah, so I left on August 15th. I headed down to South Africa. I was going to be there for about 2.5 solid weeks just because the two conferences I was asked to speak at were separated by about a week and a half. And so let's see, I arrived on August 15th. So I must have left on the 13th of August. I got into South Africa on the 15th. And then on the 18th, I spoke at Hatfield Christian Church out in the Pretoria area of South Africa. And I spoke on unity. Walking in Unity was at their annual conference. It's a mega church, a very multi-ethnic or multicultural mega church in South Africa. And then I did some speaking at Ratio Christi. There was an apologetics conference down in Cape Town that I also spoke at for Ratio Christi, South Africa. And
So now
then I
some people
came.
might not know what Ratio Christi is. We should probably describe what they're up to. Their founder, co-founder, and CEO or president and CEO, Dr. Corey Miller, is on our academic advisory council. They're kind of like a campus ministry group, evangelism group that uses apologetics to try to provide fellowship and evangelism on college campuses around the world. They have some chapters there in South Africa. So imagine like old time campus crusade, but with an apologetics focus. That's what Ratio Christi is. And so when you're down there, you get these wonderful opportunities to speak on university campuses to groups that are some Christian students, but possibly some non-Christian students who are just curious and checking you out.
Yeah, so when I was there in February, I spoke at a number of Ratio Christi chapters on different university campuses: University of Pretoria, University of Johannesburg, University of Potchefstroom, University of Stellenbosch, and University of Cape Town. And you do get this mix of people who are, deeply Christian and they completely agree with biblical unity, all the way to people who are anti-racist and, thinking that we should participate in some form or version of socialism. And so I had that a little bit across the board when I was there in February. This time, there was some pushback at one, but it was largely just people who definitely agreed with a message of biblical unity, but didn't really have words to put it in. And so offering a framework for people of what does unity look like? What is, what is shared among all humans, and then what's shared among believers, and how do we walk in unity was really helpful for people to be able to think about unity. And then I was able to answer a lot of questions. There were a lot of university students there. Their universities are definitely impacted by the critical social theories. And I was able to listen to a lot of stories, but then also offer thoughts or feedback as to how they can also navigate some of the critical theory, critical race theory, especially, that's showing up and that is targeting mostly white students, but Black students and color students are also impacted because of how the framework shows up and what it means for them as being Black or colored. A lot of the targeting, especially, is going toward white students, though.
Now, every time we have you talk about South Africa, we have to always remind people of definitions of the terms Black and colored. Can you define those for us real quick? Because that might be new for some people.
Yeah, so when you think of a Black person in South Africa, what it largely is referring to is a Black African, someone who would be Xhosa, Zulu, Sotho.
So these would be the indigenous people.
They're indigenous people to the African continent. Then you have whites. You have the colored community. Colored are people who are of mixed race. We would say brown. Some there would also say brown. Let's see who else. Then there's a large Indian population there as well.
So Indians from India is okay.
Yeah. South Africa has 11 official languages. And so that just helps you see the diversity that is on or that is within the country itself and the different cultures and things like that. And so, yeah, that's what I mean when I say white, Black, or colored being the mixture, the mixed race.
Very good. So you did a couple of conferences, you did some Ratio Christi events. Did you do any radio interviews this time? Any media appearances?
I did a radio interview on a radio station called called Radio Pulpit. And they're one of the largest radio stations in South Africa, Christian radio stations in South Africa. And I was able to promote walking in unity and really just talk about what does biblical unity look like. Our book is also already released in South Africa. And so I went to, and I didn't bring a picture, but I went into a Cume bookstore and there was our book right there on the shelf. I was so excited. So yes, the second conference I want to talk about, though, the second conference that I did at the end of August. So the first one was on the 18th. The last one was on the 31st. And that conference was through a ministry called Apologetics South Africa. And Apologetics South Africa is really working hard to bring apologetics into churches in South Africa to help pastors understand the need for apologetics in South Africa. And so they had a conference called, well, it was their annual conference, but the theme was Who Made God and Other Questions. And so even though, we all know the answer to that question, it asked questions, or the conference focused on questions that many people who don't believe would be asking, or questions that may come from kids. How do we tackle some of these real apologetic questions? And I was able to speak with Dr. Ray Siervo, who is out of Southern Evangelical Seminary, SES. And so, yeah, it was a good time.
So Bob's got pulled up here. You in the bookstore in South Africa. You
do have it.
You saw the book there, and we got a little snap of you. That's kind of fun, and it was there on the shelf. That's awesome. I'm sure that was kind of a crazy experience. I can't imagine seeing a book that I wrote on a bookstore shelf, but that's pretty awesome.
It's funny because when I walked into the bookstore, I was asking if they had it. So the larger bookstores actually have like a display, but then the smaller bookstores, this was a very small bookstore, they didn't have a display. And so I was asking, do you have it? And they were like, well, what's the author's name? And so I gave them my name, and they were like, wow, you can just spell the author's name. Most people come in and they're like, oh, I don't know how to spell the author's name. They were really impressed with me. And then my friend Suzette was like, no, that's her name. I was like, don't tell them. Yeah.
Oh, that's fun. So, and then I want to let people know we're going to talk a little bit more about the Ministry of Apologetics South Africa tonight to get to know them a little bit better. After you went to Cape Town and did the conference there and all of that, now, then you went to Uganda. And we have a picture of you and Suzette that you just mentioned a minute ago. She is your host. So this is picture number 1, Bob. And so tell us about where you guys are here. Suzette is the one who is your traveling companion when you're in South Africa, driving you around. She went with you to Uganda. What is her connection to Apologetics South Africa? What are you guys doing here?
So I received an invitation to go to Uganda through Apologetics on Mission. Apologetics on Mission is a ministry run by Ben Clifton. Ben has a vision to bring apologetics to countries that aren't heavily infiltrated with apologetics. Think of countries like Zambia, Kenya, Uganda. I think he's even doing work in Brazil, the Philippines, and things like that. And so he invited me to come and speak on unity in the midst of tribalism. So where we have this issue in the States of black and white, or this black-white binary, in many African countries, it shows up like tribalism. A lot of the same issues, it just looks like black on black. And so when I received the invitation, I was very nervous. When you and I had, I mean, as you know, we had several conversations about, should I go? Should I not go? What in the world, is this? And, is this right for our ministry at this time? I think more than anything, I was nervous because this would have been the first time that I would have traveled to a country where I didn't understand any of the languages. And
you've been to several countries in Africa, but not Uganda before. You've been done ministry in Zambia, Botswana. Yeah.
I've done a lot of work in Zambia over the years when I lived there. I had never been to Uganda, though. I had never been like truly up into Upper Africa. And so because of my previous struggles with PTSD, what we didn't want was for me to have a trigger and then to have like some issues with PTSD in Uganda. And so I was very nervous. I know you were nervous about me traveling and being there. I would have been the only woman on the team and things like that. And I had, met Ben at the SES conference last year, had a conversation with him on Zoom, but aside from that, didn't really know him.
So here's a picture of you with Ben Clifton. We have a picture here of you with Ben Clifton. He's there on
Ben is the one in the striped shirt, the more funkadelic shirt.
Yeah.
And then in the middle is Carrie Smoke. And so while we were debating on whether or not I would go, it was like, I just felt on my heart to ask Suzette if she would be willing to go, because, then I would not be alone in this journey. And I had, stayed at her house before, and she agreed. And it's awesome that she agreed. Ben and Suzette actually knew each other. Ben was going to the conference that I was going to be speaking at with Apologetics South Africa. And so that was new too. And so we all were able to go up to Uganda. Suzette had a very interesting role, because being with Apologetics South Africa, they are looking to do work in Upper Africa as well. How do they spread the apologetics vision in Upper Africa?
Okay.
And so that looks like something that Ben Clifton and Suzette with her team at Apologetics South Africa may be able to do in the future, which is bring biblical training to people in Upper Africa, specifically Uganda and Kenya at the moment. Ben is also doing work in Kenya. He went to Kenya as I was coming home. And so yeah, I think it's a very interesting time in the world of apologetics in Africa or on the African continent, because there are two, very impactful ministries that are really seeking to make inroads into churches with the tool of apologetics.
Yeah, that's great. And we're going to take a break in just a minute here, but when we come back, we want to talk about some of those specific challenges in the African continent and what are some of those things that they face. Bob's got another little picture of you with Suzette here and a little selfie. And so, just grateful for her willingness to go on the little adventure with you to Upper Africa, to Uganda. And it was kind of a late add to the trip, but possibly became very pivotal in the, in as part of Apologetics South Africa and their expansion and their journey, and the CFBU could play a small role in that as well. And I think that it's interesting. Sometimes we think that race issues are an American problem or they're a white problem. One of the things that you and I always say is that no, it just shows up differently. It's a ethnic strife, tribal strife is a universal issue. It just shows up differently in your different regional contexts. And so your message is so applicable. And this is something I want to talk about after the break, is how you brought the message of biblical unity to Africa. What did that look like? What cultural adjustments did you have to make? Do you want to?
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that. And I want to talk, Caroline on Facebook said, we should also be concerned about the prosperity gospel in Africa. And she took the words right out of my mouth. So I want to address that as well.
Okay. So we're going to hit the break right now. We're going to hear from our friends at the Unshaken Conference. We're going to actually be there in New York next week, in Buffalo for the Unshaken Conference. It's also coming to Austin this fall. Here's a little bit more about that. We'll see you in 60 seconds.
Unshaken 2024 is coming. Join three of the most influential voices in cultural apologetics, Natasha Crane, Frank Turek, and Elisa Childers, as they equip Christians to live for Jesus in a world increasingly at odds with biblical Christianity. At Unshaken, you will join hundreds of others who are seeking to navigate the intersection of societal pressure and biblical truth, covering topics such as deconstruction, social justice, sexuality, and many more. Unshaken will teach you what the Bible has already said about the social issues we face today, and equip you to stand firm in God's truth. The Unshaken Conference will be visiting Buffalo, New York, and Austin, Texas in fall 2024. For details and tickets, visit unshakenconference.com and use code FRIEND20 to get 20% off your ticket price. Join us this year for an experience that will embolden and encourage your faith. That's code FRIEND20 at unshakenconference.com. See you there.
All right. Hopefully they can hear me now. We will see you next weekend in Buffalo, New York. And Monique and I are going to take a little day trip into Canada after that. And so I'm looking forward to that. It's the first time I'm ever leaving the country. She told me I had to get a passport. So I'm all set now doing this. So hopefully we'll see you there. Come by the booth and say hello. We would love to meet you and hang out with you and that sort of a thing. Okay, Monique. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the issues and challenges that Christians in Africa are facing when it comes to apologetics. Let's first talk about race issues. We've kind of alluded to this. How would you contrast race issues and the race conversation in America versus in Africa, because when you went to Uganda, pretty much everyone in the room is Black. So what could you possibly have to say about race?
Well, that's the same question I was asking until I started to have conversations with people and understood about their tribal issues. So Uganda has over 50 languages that are like part of their national languages. And with that comes different cultures and different tribes and religious practices and all of that. And so part of what you get is, my tribe is better than your tribe, or my tribe is taller than your tribe. My tribe has lighter skin than your tribe. And so that's all within the context of Uganda. Now, when you look at the surrounding areas, what you see is there's Rwanda and Kenya and the Sudan and the Congo and all of these things. And Uganda is a really friendly place. The people are extremely humble. And so Uganda can become a safe harbor for refugees. But now we have the refugees, we have trying to mix in with the different tribes. And
so in other words,
go ahead.
So in other words, what you're saying, I just want to be clear, like, while Uganda is a fairly peaceful country, the countries that surround them are in war, and then sometimes people flee there, but then you end up having a bunch of cultural enemies, tribal rivalries, all in the same room.
Well, you have the tribal rivalries, even if those other countries didn't exist.
Okay.
But now what's happening is, even amidst the current rivalries among the Ugandan tribes, you're seeing influx of other people groups as well to the country.
Okay.
And so now I might be from Rwanda, but I might be from this tribe in Rwanda, and you're from that tribe in Rwanda, and now we're both fighting in Kenya. So there's a lot of just tribal issues that happen in Uganda. But it looks very much like, well, she's white and I'm Black, and so we don't get along. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can see how that. I'm wondering, though, how does that show up in the local church context? Are people pretty peaceful when they're from other countries, or even, in the room with people that might be tribal rivals? When they come into the church, are they able to put that aside and participate with each other as family, or do they also have challenges within the local church?
They are human. And so they have challenges within the local church as well. And so I've talked to people who say, well, if you belong to this tribe, you're not even welcome in this church. Now, I heard that in Uganda, but I also heard that in South Africa, where there was an all-white church that a colored man walked into, and the whole church was in like an uproar, and the church split while I was there. So these are issues that are, again, human. In the Ugandan context, I think that you get some churches where, we're of different ethnicities or different tribes, and we all just kind of come together, and we're going to focus on the fact that we're family and we're going to get along. We're not going to put our tribal differences before our identity in Christ. But that isn't, I would say, the norm. I would say that that is an abnormal, idea largely, because even if we come together and we sit down and we all have church from different tribes, there's still some backbiting, some words that can be said, some looks. We're going to stick to our side of the room. You're going to stick to your side of the room. That kind of situation happening. The church that I served at, Ishaka Community Church, they really seem to be pushing something different. And I think a lot of that comes through their apologetics outreach, and really wanting people to understand their faith, understand what the scriptures say, and how do we, live together as family.
That's so good, because it really reinforces to me what you and I say in trainings and in speaking when we travel all over in America, is that, look, this is not a black-white issue. This is a fallen, sinful human issue. And the gospel is just as relevant today as it was in the first century. The first century had ethnic issues too. And the solution that scripture gives us is the same solution that we need today. I'm wondering what adjustments you made in light of that cultural context. And there's an idea in missiology, old school missiology, of how do I contextualize the message for different people. The message itself is timeless. The gospel is timeless. It is transcultural. It applies to all people in all times and all places. The idea of the ethnic unity that we have through the work of Jesus Christ, that applies everywhere. But communicating that message in a way that people can understand sometimes has to be adjusted for that context. And I'm wondering, how did you, what came up for you when you were giving your very standard talks? But we have a lot of American examples that we use.
Yeah, I just changed them to African examples. So, when thinking about the idea of tribalism being blamed on colonization, well, what do you do with the tribalism that happened before colonization? Or in looking at the issues of where I would say ethnic or racial differences, I just changed the word to tribe. And then I found out, well, what are some of the tribal issues where, we would say black, white issues. I want to know what are the differences between your tribes? What are your tribes arguing about, or why don't they like each other? And I was told, well, some are taller and some are shorter, and this is how you know that they're from that tribe or from this tribe, or some have darker skin and some have lighter skin. The idea of colorism is very real on the African continent. And I mean, it's something that Black Americans deal with here, this idea that if you're lighter skin, you're prettier, and those with darker skin aren't necessarily accepted as well, and things like that. And it was the same in Africa or in Uganda, where they struggle with this idea of colorism, who is seen as more accepted, who's seen as prettier, and things like that. And so just literally working to address a lot of the same heart issues and offering the same hope. It is the same gospel message that will overcome hate, overcome difference, overcome our tribal differences. And then I was able to give a lot of examples from the States. And I, instead of, using the word ethnicity or race, I just used the word tribe. We have the Black tribe and we got the white tribe.
That's good. When you're thinking about apologetics in the context that you were in there in Uganda and South Africa, what are some of the apologetics issues that come up for them? Because not every culture has the same questions about the faith. There are different challenges within different cultures. And this is something that you and I are trying to always educate people about even stateside, that people in the Black community often have different questions that typical apologetics conferences never get around to answering. And there's just different issues, different questions that happen within different cultural contexts. So what were some of those issues that you saw people grappling with in Uganda and or in South Africa?
Christianity, the white man's religion.
That was a big one.
It was one that I came up against a couple of times. The idea in regards to race anyway, or tribes, is it okay for me to marry someone who isn't from my tribe? Or, in our context, the question would be, if I'm white, can I marry someone who's Black? Or if I'm Black, can I marry someone who's white? This question was asked to me in both South Africa and in Uganda.
So the problem though is can I marry a rival tribe member? We're both Rwandan, but can I intermarry a tribe from different tribes? That was a concern for some people, in my understanding.
That was a concern, yeah, in Uganda. And South Africa, the context is different. Okay. And so in South Africa, it would be if I'm Xhosa, can I marry someone who's white? Or if I'm colored, can I marry someone who is Zulu? So same question, same issue, but just different context.
Now, the short answer that we always give at conferences is well, God's primary concern when you're choosing a spouse is, are they a strong Christian? Are they a real Holy Spirit filled Christian? That's, in God's mind, the number one concern about choosing a spouse. Ethnicity is not really, in the mix there necessarily, but there can be real challenges in marrying interculturally. There can be practical challenges with that. How did that response go over? Like, if you're, does that?
It was a relief to many people.
Interesting. Okay.
I think that, it doesn't, like you're saying, it's not without its challenges. And you might have to have other conversations with your parents, but as believers, this is what the scriptures say. This is where the scriptures lead us in looking at the reality that our identity is in Christ and what that means for humans who are in Christ,
So what were some of the other challenges? So is Christianity white man's religion, intertribal, interethnic marriage? What are some of the other things they're grappling with?
Truth. How do I know that Christianity is true? How do I offer a defense for my faith? Is truth knowable? Another thing is Islam. In Uganda, there is definitely more than what I would have thought, an infiltration of Islam. And how do we defend Christianity against the Islamic faith? Another thing is the African tribal religions, either ancestor worship or veneration of ancestors and things like that. Like, what makes Christianity different, or why can't I participate in syncretism? Syncretism is a very big issue on the African continent. What are the ways? And I'm not saying that syncretism isn't a big issue in the States, but that syncretism looks different there. And so addressing the issue of syncretism there takes many different twists and turns, and helping people to even understand that, hey, you're participating in syncretism. Another issue I would say is the prosperity gospel. And one of the things that I addressed directly was, and I really had to be careful in how I said this, but the church's desire to sound like the American Black church and to preach the way American Black preachers preach, like a T.D. Jakes or a Creflo Dollar, or I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of some more, but a Juanita Bynum, you know what I mean? Like, so what I saw in Uganda, I'm not saying this was in South Africa, but in Uganda, was it appeared to be like a mimic of what the Black church is here in the States. And I addressed that, and encouraged them not to seek to follow in the steps of the Black American church, but that they would actually participate and worship God from the context of the good, true, and beautiful that's within their own culture. Many people don't understand that, especially on the African continent, that the Black church in America is steeped in so many issues.
Yeah.
But they lift the Black church up to be like the highest of highs in like the way that we worship, the way that we sound. And that was very sad to me, because the Ugandan culture has so many things that are good, true, and beautiful within it. And the Black American church has a lot of issues. And, what I don't want or would hate to see is for people to want to emulate that and then inadvertently also get the issues that come with it.
So Elaine's asking a great question on YouTube. She says, do they get that from television in terms of imitation? And is it common to think that that's what the standard is?
I think so, especially if you're Black.
Okay.
NutriCoach says, I hope they start to emulate Vodi Bakum instead. I would love that. And I don't think that he is considered part of the Black church. And
Yeah.
so when we're looking at the Black American church, there's a specific sound. It's going to be Fred Hammond, Donnie McClurkin, John P. Key, like as far as some of their the music and things like that. And that's what I heard there. It was like these big notes and the way that they had to carry this tune and, all of that. And I was just like, man, it made me sad to think that is what's being shipped out to the African continent. And then, in addition to that, there's all types of things that are being shipped out to the African continent through the UN, through UNESCO, through the United Nations Family Planning Act, through all of these UN subsidiaries that promote comprehensive sexuality education, life orientation, abortion, just all of these atrocities. They're horrible, but it's being funded through the United Nations to be able to help build infrastructure or to help give money to governments. And so the United Nations is really buying up a lot of these governments so that they can get these different ideas or ideologies into their schools. But America is the largest funder of the United Nations. And so when I look and see who is funding the abortion clinic in, Stellenbosch or in Johannesburg, and I look and I see it's UNESCO or the United Nations Family Planning Act or UNESCO or some version of a UN subsidiary, I'm like, man, that's American dollars that are promoting this there. And it's the same thing in Uganda.
So in a way, we're exporting some of the worst ideas in the West into Uganda, which is really sad. I want to play a couple more video clips and pictures here. The first one, this is clip 1, Bob, is just a short clip of Suzette teaching, I think, in Uganda. I just want to give people a feel for, the types of venues that you were in. And these were some of the students that were there at the conference. Now, tell us about Suzette's talk. We don't have good audio on this, but tell us about this very important talk that Suzette was giving.
Suzette, first of all, she's just like, I feel like a walking Bible. Wherever she goes, she's just quoting scripture. And so her talk was on truth. And how do we know truth? Is truth knowable? And I was just so grateful for her talk, because in understanding, is truth knowable and is there objective truth, that allowed, me, I came in after her and talked about this idea of my truth and subjective truth and how that plays a role in our tribalism. So yeah, she did a great job talking about truth for 9 days. I think we spoke almost everything. We spoke 7 out of 9 days.
Wow.
And she talked about truth every time. And it was so helpful. The comments and feedback that she received on truth were just mind-blowing, because when, I think it's questions that I asked you when we first started, or when we first started having our conversations. Yeah, it was just so good. She's also a student at SES, Southern Evangelical Seminary, Norm Geisler's seminary. And so, yeah, it was fantastic.
So there's let's go to picture 5, Bob. There was I want to show this group shot. Tell us about this picture.
So this is at a leaders conference that we did. These are the leaders from the Ishaka Community Church in Ishaka, Uganda. Ishaka is on the western side of the country. And so we landed in Kampala, which is middle to east side of the country. And then we drove 6 hours into Ishaka. And Ishaka it would be considered like a small town feel, but it houses Kampala International University, which is a medical university, and it houses students from the neighboring country, from Uganda, but also from the neighboring countries. And so many of those students attend Ishaka Community Church, and then they get trained up in apologetics, and then they get sent back to their home countries. So it's a sending church, and it is, I would say by standard, probably a mega church. There were maybe 200 to 300 people on the Sunday morning, and then they do a Sunday night service as well with about the same amount of people.
So I want to go to picture 14 if we can, Bob. One of the things that we did, thanks to the generosity of our donors, and we're very grateful for our donors because we are so much more than a podcast. We really are doing so much work, and this mission trip was funded by people watching this stream right now. And one of the things that our donors funded a couple of years ago was us being able to produce the reconciled curriculum. It's a small group curriculum. And we sent, what did we send, like 50 or 75 copies with you in your suitcase to be able to resource the students there. So that was a great opportunity that we just want to thank our donors for making possible. How was that received?
It was received very well because we gave the books at the end of the conference. And so while I had been talking about tribalism, for days, now they had something really to go back and to study the word with. And so when I do my talks on, and I didn't just talk about tribalism, I also talked about identity and belonging, and, how does all of that fit as children of God, and go to support the tribe that we are now a part of. We are now of the tribe of Christ. We are no longer of the tribe of Adam. And so because Reconciled also comes with videos and things like that, they can do it as a part of their small groups. So Ashaka Community Church has upwards of 10 to 15 small groups that each have 10 to 15, maybe 20 people inside. We actually, one night hosted all of their small groups, and it was over 150 people or so there. And so, it was, the curriculum will help them to be able to do a bit more of a deep dive into the things that they would have learned or heard me speak about. Especially when I did the talk Foundation for Unity, because that's a small group time anyway. So in the middle of that talk, as you know, I also break the audience up into small groups to be able to look at what does the Bible say about Christians, what does the Bible say about those who are outside of Christ. What do we learn about things like our matters of providence? My skin color is a matter of providence. When we look at something like Psalm 139, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Regardless of your skin color, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Your skin color didn't surprise God, so that's a matter of his providence. He didn't see fit to change it. So through divine providence, it has been allowed. And, that was something that was really new to people. When I spoke on that in South Africa, I had come up behind Ray Siervo, and he told the story of how his daughter had passed of cancer a couple years ago, and how God did not change that. And then I came up and I talked about divine providence. And, when we think about providence, we also have to understand that some things are providentially allowed, even if they're tough.
Yeah.
God's divine providence doesn't mean that everything is hunky-dory. It is that God saw fit to allow it and not change it. And sometimes that includes things that are the result of sin. And so, yeah, I think it was helpful for people. So I'm grateful for that.
That's wonderful. And we had sent, 50 or 75 copies last time with you too on the trip back in the spring that you left to resource the Christians there. So, we're just so grateful to be able to gift people in that way. We're going to go to another ad break here in a minute, but I want to hear from Suzette. We've been talking about her. We have a short 2-minute video where you were talking to her. Maybe do a little bit of setup here. She's going to talk a little bit about what they do with Apologetics South Africa.
So this video clip is a labor of love. We actually had recorded 40 minutes of interview with the Apologetics South Africa director team. And so Suzette is one of 3 directors. There's John Grobler and Tilly, I want to say her last name is like Kostler. But the 3 of them together run or lead Apologetics South Africa. And so I had done an interview with them. Unfortunately, the audio did not come out the best. My data and internet was very sketchy. And so this ending piece is what, was clear so that everyone can hear it. But Apologetics South Africa really focuses on bringing apologetics to South Africa. And they do that in a number of ways. They have a full-time Bible college, but then they also have a part-time Bible college. They host 2 conferences a year, a women's conference at the end of March, or at the beginning of March, the very first weekend in March, and then a general apologetics conference the very last weekend in August. And they are, they're in 2 schools. They're being able to actually bring apologetics into Christian schools, which is, not really heard of in South Africa. And so they're doing a lot of very good work. And I am so excited for the opportunity to serve alongside them. They have a lot of needs. It's very hard to get resources into South Africa. There aren't, Frank Turek or
and the mail service is horrible. You can't just mail stuff there.
We can't. So I'm thinking I should do a book drive, because they can't just get books. It is very, very hard. Like, I've lived in South Africa and I have had my mail stolen. I have had packages come to me already opened and picked over, and people sending me the leftovers. But this is what happens there. They can't just go to a bookstore and I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, or, things like that. It is very interesting. And I only can attribute it to Jesus, that walking in unity is there. What you will find when you walk into a Kuhn bookstore, which is their largest Christian bookstore in South Africa, you'll find T.D. Jakes. You'll find Paula White. You'll find Creflo Dollar and all of these prosperity gospel people, but you will not find Natasha Crane. You won't find Vodi Bakum. It's far few and in between. And so when you're thinking of real apologetics resources, like even this one here by Norm Geisler, this is a textbook that for SES, and I had to take it to Suzette. I had to order it on Amazon and take it to her because she couldn't get it. I took a number of books this time because they couldn't get it there. And so, part of the way that I would love to be able to resource them is to be able to take them books and start to really build their library up, because they aren't getting it there. So that's all I'll say on that, Krista.
Okay, let's play the clip. And I think it's a 2-minute clip. We're going to hear from Suzette, one of the directors at Apologetics South Africa.
We are all teaching either full-time, part-time, and then we also take hands with another church that is in Johannesburg. One of our previous ministry leaders at one of our conferences, the pastor's wife and daughter came, and they have a Christian school, wanted apologetics to be applied in the school, and she is full-time employed, ministering, teaching apologetics from grade 1 to 12, and the inductive Bible study method that we apply.
So a staff member from Apologetics SA is now using the tools from Apologetics SA in a Christian school in Johannesburg.
Yes, and we are working with Dr. Thomas McCuddy, to work on the curriculum and apply that in school. I'm teaching at a school grade 8 and 9, where we also teach the biblical studies. Then we are speakers at different conferences if churches or ministry leaders would like us to come and speak on a certain apologetics topic. And then we have small groups that we take lead in. Tilly is serving in an old age home where she teaches and trains them according to what the Bible is, the context of the Bible and biblical training. And what else? Wherever God
conference, there are 2 conferences every year. There is their women's conference at the first weekend in March, and your Apologetics conference at the very last weekend in August
every year. And then I had the opportunity to go and minister in Uganda with you.
Yes.
Year. So where God calls and how we can equip the church. There we go. So speaking at churches, I have been asked to open at a school, finishing as the students leave the school, that we go and preach there and encourage them. Yes, so where God calls, there we go.
If you want to know the worth of a seminary, go take a look at their graduates. Our graduates are all over the world. They're planting churches, they're revitalizing churches, they're translating the Bible, they're starting discipleship movements. It's heart-shaking, life-changing, and just mind-expanding of what God is doing.
You know, sometimes I really do have to pinch myself that what I get to do with the ministries at BTS, the engaging with the students and the impact that God uses us to have on the lives of our students, it's a pleasure, it's an honor, and it's a joy.
Jesus is still building his church. So we need to equip the pastor teachers who equip the saints. We need to equip the elders who shepherd the church. And I am grateful that Birmingham Theological Seminary is available to be a part of the expansion of the kingdom of God in these very crucial days.
Okay, once again, if you want to get connected with our friends at Birmingham Theological Seminary, go to bts.education. Now, Monique, see, there's just so much to cover here. Our friend Ben Clifton is in the comments on YouTube and giving us greetings from Kenya, which was the kind of the next step in his trip after Uganda. He went on to Kenya to start continuing the work there in bringing apologetics to Kenya. But so just want to give him a shout out as well.
Has a vision for bringing apologetics to countries that don't, have that as a resource. And, I best I could tell, I think his focus is really going to be Uganda as a central place. I think, work with Apologetics South Africa, and an organization that's already established on the African continent, could be very helpful. There is an organization that was sparked out of Apologetics on Mission called Apologetics Uganda. They are, up and running or getting up and running. They actually partnered with Ben and helped to bring their people in Uganda through Ben actually has a 16-course class on international apologetics. And so what happens is that Apologetics Uganda funnels their people through Apologetics on Mission. And what happens is once a year, after everyone has completed their 16 courses, there is a graduation. And so we were able to be present at the Apologetics on Mission / Apologetics Uganda graduation.
That's awesome. What were some of the challenges that you faced on the trip? Like, what are some of the things that were difficult, or you thought, oh, I might do this differently next time, or I don't know, just what were some of the challenges for you?
I think that overall the trip went well. I would say I would go back. And here's a bit of a personal moment. I really struggled with my own levels of comfort. And I have been to Zambia several times. I have worked in bush villages several times. And there was just, maybe it's because it's been 6 years, I'm not sure, but I really struggled with how much comfort I wanted. And it was a very humbling experience for me, because I don't really tend to think of myself as being the person who is going to whine and complain about, I mean, you might think that about me, Krista, but the person who's going to whine and complain over levels of comfort. And so there was a situation with ants. Now, everybody here knows I do not like bugs. I cannot with a bug. I mean, these ants are big. Like, these are the kind of ants that walk up on you and take your stuff. Like, they are big. And I was like, Father, I can't with the ants. And like showering with very little water pressure, and making sure that your water also goes into like the bucket so you can rinse off. And we were in like great accommodations. It wasn't that we were in like shabby accommodations, and this is why things were like that. Things are like that because that's the infrastructure of the country in many places. And I found myself complaining a lot. And I just, like, the Lord highlighted it for me. And I had to get to a point where I was just like, okay, I can't complain. Like, I am blessed. And the people in Uganda, this is, for many, I would say most people, this is their normal daily life. And so who am I to complain or to think that maybe I deserve something different? I don't. Like, just because I'm an American doesn't mean that I get to have all my luxuries and all my comforts all the time. And I'm only doing this for 9 days. And so that was a huge place of repentance for me. I remember one time you called and I was like, I can't talk to you because I'm just going to complain. And then I had to hang up. It was very much, how do I focus on the good and how am I content regardless of my circumstance?
Yeah, we had a conversation. We read through Philippians 4 together to try to work through that. And, I think that definitely all of us would probably struggle with that. And I appreciate your transparency about it, but for the sake of the gospel, doing what you did and making that decision and even really trying to work on your heart posture about it. And I know you've lived in South Africa. You lived there for 4.5 years prior to us starting this ministry. Some people who follow the ministry still don't know that, so I always have to repeat it, that you were a missionary in South Africa for 4.5 years. You've hosted short-term mission teams. You've been a short-term missionary multiple times, not just on this trip or these trips this year, even prior to that. And, a question that I've always wondered about is, what do you see as being some of the pros and cons of short-term missions? Like, what do you think is the value of you going over there for a few weeks? And when can short-term missions maybe, not be helpful? And, like some of the pros and cons, just from your unique perspective as a former kind of long-term, I live here missionary and seeing and hosting short-term mission teams.
That's a great question. I think there are many pros and many cons. I would say pros are that as Americans, we can come with resource that can actually impact a community. I am not a fan, personally, I'm not saying that this is the way it needs to be. I am not a fan of coming up with an idea in an area that doesn't have resource and then not working with the community to be able to establish or to be able to create a foundation so that they can move forward. And as Americans, we do have a lot of resource. Sometimes it just takes thinking outside of the box to be able to help accomplish the vision. I think a pro is, for us, it's being able to see like the rest of the world doesn't live the way you live. And we can be so insular, or insular, looking inward, that we never take time to really look at the challenges that other people face. Not having water, not having, just your daily necessities that are needed, women not having like sanitary wear. Like there are many issues that we just don't even fathom.
Not having flushing toilets. You were in some situations where there weren't flushing toilets.
Yeah, or having a long drop latrine or things like that. I think but then there's also, we do have like the apologetics books, and we can go over and have conversations and offer a different way to consider Christianity and to understand, like, this is the truth of the gospel. Here, let me also bring this book with me to be able to resource you. I think it is about empowering. I never want to go into a country and leave it the same way that I arrived. How can I leave a country better than how I found it when I walked in? And so part of that for me is I don't want to ever bring back money from that country. We want to leave our money in the country because that helps to establish their financial, infrastructure. How do I just give money to give? Like, what can I give away? How can I give and it's not simply about money and resources, but how can I give me away? How can I share my struggle, my struggles, even if they're not the same, but to connect with someone else? I told a lot of personal stories on this trip. I was definitely more vulnerable there than I have ever been in our ministry together. And it was a point of connection. What I don't want is for people to think, well, that's the American girl. No, that I want them to understand that I'm your sister. And even if I come from a different culture, their pain is pain. Mm-hmm. And I can connect with you in pain, and joy is joy. And I can connect with you in joy. And there might be different reasons for your pain or different reasons for your joy, but there are places where we can meet together. Yeah, so I hope that answers part of that question. I think one of the downsides of short-term missions is that a lot of times what I've seen personally is that as Americans, we can go into a country and think that we know best or that we know better because we do things differently. And that isn't true. That isn't always true. I'll say that. We have to remember that their countries have been running how they run, for good or bad, for a very long time. And their cultures are their cultures and have been for a very long time. And so before we come in and judge a culture as being bad, or before we come in and say, well, this needs to change and that needs to change, we might need to take some time just to really learn and understand, why do you do it this way?
I think I think one of the benefits of your situation, and that really enhances short-term missions, is you have people that live there and work there and are culturally native to the people there that can carry on the work. And so you're coming just to supplement what's already there. You're not coming in to be the savior or to do everything all at once. I think the ideal situation is coming in and supplementing the boots on the ground that are already living and working there.
Yes, I never want to come in, and I would hope that no one would want to come in and infantilize a community or be like, well, you guys just don't know here, we'll just do it for you. No, how can I come in and support the work that you're doing? This is your country. This is your community. You're going to have to be the ones to run with this vision. You know your people better than I do on any day. And so what are the conversations that need to be had to call you up to that so that you can continue to run? But don't expect me to run. Like, I can cheer you on, I can help resource you, but at the end of the day, I live here and you live there. And so that needs to be your vision. That needs to be your heart prayer to God on how he would have you run and spread the gospel there.
Yeah, that's good. And I love also that you guys are really bringing a solid message. It's not just humanitarian work, so many short-term mission trips have just turned into nothing but humanitarian work, or very little more than that, very little gospel presentation. You guys are really trying to bring meat to people and not just humanitarian work. And not to say that the humanitarian work is bad or doesn't have its place, but people, first and foremost, they need the gospel. They need the hope of Jesus Christ. And that's an increasing concern that I've had about short-term missions. It just seems like it's some combination of humanitarian work and sightseeing. And I'm not always sure that that's actually useful.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, when you're on a missions trip, it's not about your comfort. And I had to learn that the hard way. This trip, it's not about just going out sightseeing. The countries are beautiful. Uganda's beautiful. South Africa's beautiful. And at the same time, that doesn't mean that it's wrong to take a day to also see the country, to have downtime. When you are on a short-term mission, there is a lot of work. There's a lot of emotion. There is a lot happening. You are like, the senses are overloaded often. And so, yeah, I do recommend take a day. You're going to need a day. You're going to need a day to decompress. You'll need a day to debrief. Like, hopefully you're having debrief times every day, but a day where it's like, whoa, like, I'm not serving today. Today, I'm just going to go and I'm going to have fun. Like, I don't personally see anything wrong with that. What I see as being not the best is when that becomes your entire vision. So now I'm working just to get to the shark, cage dive, or I'm working just to get to the bungee jump or to the safari, instead of being able to be present every day with the people that you are, here to serve.
That's good.
I want to, and there's some questions on YouTube. Let's see. Kim says, long drop latrine. I need you to say more. So a long drop latrine is largely in places where there isn't running water or toilets. And so what it is like, there's like a 6-foot hole dug in the ground. And usually the ones that I've seen, it's just a hole and you stand over the hole, and that's where, you squat, and that's how you use the restroom. Some have like a semblance of a toilet over it. But yeah, and latrines can be very dangerous because small children can fall into latrines and then, they perish. And so the goal would be to get, running water into places where there are latrines, and to have actual bathrooms so that people, aren't stepping in urine and feces and tracking that everywhere, so that children aren't, falling into holes and things like that. And so
and humanitarian short-term mission trips can have their place. That would make a great one.
They absolutely do. I am not against the humanitarian mission. I am for the promotion of the gospel first. Like Ashaka Community Church has an orphanage attached to it. That orphanage really needs some work. Like they really need a lot of work at this orphanage. And, how can we come along and support that? How can we support Apologetics South Africa so that they can, because they're on the ground and they're an established organization, I would say even more so than Apologetics, or definitely more so than Apologetics Uganda. So how can we support Apologetics South Africa to be able to, one, continue their biblical studies with their students, but then have them take a team up to, as part of like their mission work, to be able, because they're already on the continent, to be able to go and like work in the orphanage, or to, lay pavement, and to just make sure that things are safe and secure. So
yeah, that's good.
My thoughts.
That's good. Okay, we got to get to the second segment here. We only got a few minutes left while you scroll through the.
Go ahead. Sorry, I'm just looking to make sure that.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So earlier today, we went to see the Am I Racist? I don't know what to call this thing. Comedy, mockumentary, quasi-investigative journalism. I don't know what to call this thing. From Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire. We're going to play a few seconds from the trailer. And then we'll come back and talk about it, share some of our thoughts. That's okay. We have a technical problem. We're going to fix that. Oh, I'm going to stall. So we're fixing the technical problem. We're going to watch the clip. Do we got it?
The sun is going down and my room is becoming real
I know.
dark.
Yeah, I'm getting a little concerned. Do you have a little? You need a face light.
I have a ring light. I hope that it'll be okay though.
All right.
Time, Krista. Hey, you guys want to see my pajamas? Look it's Chester Cheetah.
Oh my gosh, this is not what I had in mind with stalling. All right, we're gonna go to the trailer now.
I love my pants.
The pajamas.
What's up with white people? What are you doing to decenter your whiteness?
Who's making it the center? Why are they doing that?
And what you're doing is you're stretching out of your whiteness. This is more for you in this field.
White.
Folks.
White.
Trash. White supremacy.
White woman.
White boy.
White.
Entitlement.
White.
Centering.
White.
Silence.
Is there a black person around here?
There's a black person right here. Does he not exist?
They gonna say I'm racist, but they call everybody racist.
Hi, Robin.
Hi. And what's your name?
I'm Matt.
Matt. Hi,
Yeah.
Matt.
Nice to meet you.
I just had to ask who you are because you have to be careful.
Never be too careful.
They gonna say you racist, but they call everybody racist.
Oh my! Oh my! Oh my! It was a fun little 90-minute romp through. I don't even know how do you. Well, what would you say was the big idea there in the "Am I racist" thing?
I don't know. I laughed like through, I would say 99% of it. It was hilarious. I think the big idea was to show the insanity behind the racism conversation right now.
Specifically the DEI trainings and programming and all of that.
Yes. And how many people who are, doing DEI or doing anti-racism are really profiting off of it. And so there's a need to keep the conversation going. I think that was the big takeaway of like, hey, look, if we were to actually just see people as humans and not need to enter into this space of anti-racism or DEI that continually promotes this racist narrative, we might be able to make more progress just as humans.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I also think there was a missed opportunity there.
Oh, I think that there was a couple of missed opportunities. Yeah. I would love to. We haven't talked about it. We just went to it and then we left. So we haven't talked about it together. So I'm curious as to what, and people might not know that Robin DiAngelo was there at the end, who's the author of the very famous book, White Fragility, which really, to me, the book was lurking in the background of the whole film.
Yeah.
Of her ideology, her framework, her model, and
Between
then
her and Kendi.
Yeah, her and Kendi, and Matt Walsh just basically putting on a bad wig and some glasses and a disguise, and trying to take the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion to their logical end. And he does this with a straight face through the whole thing, and I'm just sitting there thinking, how is he doing this? Like, he goes to a DEI training. He becomes certified through some farm of DEI certification. He goes to one of those white women dinners where the white women pay $5,000 to be berated by experts. I mean, it's a lot of outlandish situations that he sort of infiltrates. And
yeah, I think that while there was a lot that was just hilarious, and I think it's hilarious because we have these conversations all the time, and when you have thought through a lot of this, you can see the insanity behind it, and so it makes you laugh to be like, wow, people are actually doing this, they're still doing this. But I also was wondering as I was sitting there, wow, if I was on the other side of this conversation still, I wonder how I would feel about it. I wonder if it would just seem like there's another right-wing conservative who really doesn't care about racism that happens in our country. and that is just here to make fun of people like me. I wish that there would have been a hint more of a persuasive conversation of saying like, hey, look, but here are some real answers. Or, we don't deny that racism exists. Racism can happen to any person. And how do we actually tackle that conversation? Yeah, I felt like there were just opportunities missed, but it was funny, and it was really funny. I just when you're laughing at someone else's expense.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I thought it was funny. I laughed a lot. It's a lot of the private thoughts I've had of like, I wonder how this would play out if you took it all the way to the end, and asking some of these questions. So there was a lot of things I could relate to in that. But I had the very similar feeling about it is this is not a persuasive movie. This is a movie directed toward people who already think that DEI is racist and they call it die instead of DEI. And it's really just geared toward people that already want to lampoon DEI. And if I had tried to take you to that when you were on the other side of the conversation, when you were still in that ideology and mindset, that would have been a mess. And you would have walked out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there was no sense of compassion about an acknowledgement of actual racism. The movie is sort of designed to program you to think that racism is a thing of the past. It's not really real, and that there is no struggle, and we should just stop talking about race and the problem will go away, which you and I both know that that's not true. People think that's our position. I'm getting a lot of comments on the ads that we're running right now. People think that we are racism deniers. There's no question about it. They think that our position is racism can't be real and we should just stop talking about it. I think that's almost an equally damaging message as the DEI propaganda. And for the sake of the gospel, it makes me have concerns. I felt guilty about laughing at some of the gotcha tactics that Matt Walsh engages in. And I don't think that it acts persuasively. It's really just designed, it's a FUBU type of thing. It's like it was designed by conservatives for conservatives who already think that DEI is ridiculous.
Yeah. I can't believe you said FUBU. I didn't even know you knew what that was.
Hey, I know things.
By us.
I know things.
Okay, go ahead, girl. Sorry, I haven't heard of FUBU since like the mid to 2000s or 90s. Yeah,
I'm doing big things over here with the Urban Dictionary.
You go ahead, yes. But yeah, I did feel like it was a bit of a missed opportunity. Now, I think that there was a lot to laugh about. I think that there's a lot to laugh about because we see the insanity of it. But how everyone who was laughing in that theater, my question is how are you going to reach out to the person who actually believes like Robin DiAngelo does?
Yeah, there's no training or setup to see those people. Like, I want to reach them with the gospel. And this is my concern that with the comments, like I said, we've been running ads on social media lately for our book. And the kind of comments that I've had to field, so most of them are horrific. Most of them are by white people who do not want to engage in any conversation about race or racism because they're so jaded and they just think the conversation is a complete waste of time. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, there can be problematic conversations about race, unproductive conversations about race, but that doesn't help our hearts orient toward how am I going to persuade people to come believe in what Jesus has accomplished on the cross and the unity that he has accomplished. Like, it doesn't put compassion in my heart for people like 2019 Monique Duson. And I see people on social media write people off like you all the time. And that there's no hope. Don't engage with these people. It's a waste of time. It's stupid. They're stupid. And this movie doesn't help that.
Yeah. Yes, I can't say that I disagree. I think that the gospel is needed on both sides of the conversation, and a true understanding of our common humanity, a true understanding of our identity. Like when Paul talks about bearing with one another, I think that idea is just lost on so many Christians. It's okay for me to give up on you because we're talking about race. I don't see that anywhere else, yeah. And so it makes the conversation that much harder. How do I reach out to my brother or sister even if we disagree? Like, how do I keep the conversation going? I remember when we used to have these conversations and you would be like, look, I'm not trying to win the war. I'm just trying to win the next conversation. How do we win the next conversation with people? I don't think that we win the next conversation with, films like Am I Racist? But does that mean that there aren't places for films like Am I Racist? I would say there is a place at times for something like Am I Racist? Because at times you really just need to sit down and look at the insanity of it among your people and laugh. And I think that that's what that film provided today. Like, I didn't know those people in the theater and we all laughed. And we laughed hard because of the insanity of it all. But that might need to be more for just the us, and not something. We have to recognize that there's a time and a place for different things. And how do we, even if I'm laughing at this, how do we have good conversations in the public square? How do I go after the heart of the person who may still be upholding anti-racism, who may see racism like inherently within all white people? Like, how do I go after that person's heart?
And that's what I don't see on social media. And that's what always bothers me. Like, I agree with you. There's a place for this film. It is legitimately funny. It is legitimately entertaining, has high production value. I'm not saying don't go see it, but in your worldview conversation, if you take young people to see it, please don't neglect to talk about the fact that the movie does not bring hope. There is no hope that is presented in that film other than let's just do our best to see our common humanity. That's basically there's kind of a little spoofy end speech that Matt Walsh gives. But there's no ultimate hope for ethnic unity presented in the film. It is a strictly secular film. And if we're going to have a worldview conversation with a young person about it, we have got to steer them to really the hope is in the gospel. And sometimes we do need to see race. Sometimes racism happens, and sometimes we do need to speak about it. Now, maybe it's not in the way that is presented in the film, but sometimes racial division needs to be a conversation. Sometimes we need to talk about these issues and the better hope that is offered in the gospel. There was no hope in that film. There was nothing of eternal statement or value in it. It was good for a laugh, and that's great. That has its place. But I think that we've got to be careful not to disciple our hearts where it just becomes, it's okay for me to always have that posture of laughing and spoofing when it comes to race, because that's not going to help us persuade people. That's not going to help us change hearts and minds.
Yeah, I completely lost my train of thought now. Sorry.
You're tired. That's okay.
I am. I really am. I mean,
all right.
My gosh.
So next week, we will be back with a live show. No, we will not. We will be in Buffalo.
I was like, girl.
No, next week is dark. The following week is going to be the world premiere of our mini doc, Origins, about our story, the story of our friendship. It's number one question we get is, how did you meet? How did you become friends? How did you stay friends? We're going to talk all about it in 2 weeks. So be on the chat if you want to ask your question about our story. In 2 weeks, we'll premiere our mini doc Origins and just kind of talk more about our backstory.
Yes. And we are doing that in preparation for our book, Walking in Unity. Its launch on October 15th. We are 1 month and 1 day away from the release of Walking in Unity. If you have not pre-ordered Walking in Unity yet, please go pre-order today. It helps our numbers with our publisher so that they know that people are really interested in having a biblical conversation on race, justice, and unity. What does it look like for us to be able to live together and walk together in unity as family? Our book is answering that question, and it helps our publisher know that these conversations and books are wanted and needed. You can go to walkinginunity.com today and pre-order.
And with that, we will see you in 2 weeks. We're going to leave you with our book trailer, Walking in Unity. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
My name is Monique Duson. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. Life was tough, but more than that, life was Black. Lessons that the streets taught me were secondary to what my mother instilled in me. Being Black. I was a Black child, and one day I would grow up to be a strong Black woman.
My name is Krista Bontrager. I was raised by a Christian mother in the suburbs of Los Angeles. My mother instilled in me a love for Jesus and a strong work ethic. She taught me that if I worked very, very hard, someday I would grow up, go to college, get a good job, and have a family. In 2018, Monique came to live with my family. I asked Monique a lot of questions about race and justice. Things like, what is systemic racism? Should every church be multi-ethnic? And am I racist because I'm white?
I welcomed Krista's questions, but persuading her to what I knew was true about America wasn't easy.
We had many difficult conversations. And even though she didn't say it directly, I knew Monique thought my family and I were racists. I felt sad and confused.
I was not confused. I saw Krista and her family the way I saw most white people, privileged and participating in racist systems of whiteness. One thing quickly became clear. We saw the world very differently. And either we were both going to change or we were not going to be friends.
Our worldviews were on a collision course.
Join us as we share our journey searching the scriptures and gaining a biblical perspective on issues like the multi-ethnic church, systemic racism, and how our nation became so divided.
And how we discovered a truth that is deeper than our cultural and ethnic differences, that Jesus makes cultural enemies into family.
Walking in Unity is coming October 15th from Harvest House.